Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Welcome back to Crime Capsule. I'm your host, Benjamin Morris. This week we are continuing our conversation with Larry Wood, author of Murder and Mayhem in Southeast Kansas, published by the History Press. If you missed the first part of our interview, be sure to check it out. Thanks as always for listening. Let's get back to it. Larry, welcome back to Crime Capsule.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
So last week we had a delightful tour through the murdery misdeeds of Miss Minnie Wallace. And this week, I'm afraid we've got to go somewhere a little darker, don't we?
A little darker, yeah. It's a
little darker.
There's nothing now, romantic about this one.
No, nothing at all. Now, I'm going to start off by saying, so it'll take me a quick second to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of my absolute favorite novels in the world, and I know that I'm not alone in this, is the novel called The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It is a staggering vision of kind of what life would look like, after a kind of apocalypse, and father and son traveling through a wasteland, and very recognizable southern wasteland, I should say. And the folks they meet along the way, and it's kill or be killed. It's pure survival. It's very, very harrowing, challenging novel, but it is also, strangely beautiful in all its desolation, and made into a great film, a couple of years ago. And it's a really powerful document. And there's a scene in this novel, which anyone listening to this show, if you have seen the movie or read the book, you know what scene I'm talking about. It's when the father and the son visit a house in the middle of nowhere, and they find a hatch in the bottom in a floorboard, okay, kind of hidden away in the floorboards. And that hatch leads down to a basement sort of cellar area. And I'm not going to say what they find there, because folks who know already know, and folks who don't know need to see the film for their own sake. But I could not help, Larry, as I was reading this chapter in your book. I could not help it. That scene came to mind over and over and over again as I read about the Bloody Benders in Kansas. Let's just dive right in to this. You have written about this case before. You say that it is very, very well known, and yet it's also one of the most enigmatic and mysterious cases out of the whole state of Kansas. So it's tell us what's going on here.
Well, it's still being researched and written about today. As a matter of fact, as we speak, probably there are a team of archaeologists from the University of Kansas over there right now trying to find artifacts and stuff, that might lend some more light on what happened, and maybe even turn up more victims and so forth. But of course, we're talking about the notorious Bloody Benders of Labette County, Kansas. Labette County is what's just one county over from Missouri and one county up from Oklahoma. So it's in the southeast, definitely in the pretty much southeast part of Kansas. This happened close to the town of Cherryvale, although I don't think Cherryvale was even there yet, or if it was, it wasn't wasn't very well established. But there was, well, rather
what
than
time period are we in? Tell us, kind of set the stage for us.
Okay. This was in the early 1870s. I started to go ahead and tell you what happened, but first, I think we can kind of flash back to what led up to it. But in March of 1873, Dr. York, a guy named Dr. York, he was a physician, went missing. And he was not the first one to go missing. There had been several people in this same area that it had just mysteriously disappeared, but it hadn't caused a general uproar until Dr. York disappeared, because he came from a prominent family, well-to-do family, influential, and his brother was a state senator. So his brother started out looking for him, made a trip from Independence, Kansas to Fort Scott, Kansas, looking for his brother. He found out that his brother had reached Fort Scott, but then he had started back to Independence by way of the Osage Mission, which was where the Catholic Church, did mission work with the Osage Indians. It's now called St. Paul, a little town called St. Paul. But anyway, so the doctor set out to retrace his brother's steps, and he got as far as St. Paul and Osage Mission, and he was still there, still alive when he got that far. He had found people that had talked to him and so forth, and he got about halfway between Osage Mission and Independence, and he lost complete track of him. No one seemed to have known anything about where he went. So he talked to this, one of the places he called at was a family called the Benders that ran a little grocery store, kind of a wayside inn, wayside grocery there along the Osage Trail. And he came away thinking they were kind of weird, because this girl, it's like 16-year-old girl named Kate. That's one of the things, a lot of the misconceptions about Kate is they think she was 21. A lot of things that have been written about her say she was 21, 22 years old. She wasn't. She was just a teenage girl. That's proven by census records. But anyway, Kate, who kind of fancied herself a spiritualist and, a psychic, had told the guy that if she didn't know where his brother was, but if she'd come back the next day, she would conduct a seance or something, and be able to tell him where he was, And so he came away thinking, well, this is kind of a weird family, but he really didn't suspect them at the time. So he went on back to Independence and kind of dropped his investigation because it had led nowhere but dead ends. And then about a month later, this was in early March.
Yeah, I think it's important, as we understand this case, to think about the context of the times. Now, Kansas had only been a state for about 10 years by that point, right? So it had gotten statehood in 1861. And if you think about the fact that statehood, it was a process, the infrastructure of law and order, of justice system, of marshals, of deputies and sheriffs was still, you could not call it fully established, right? There was banditry, there were outlaws on, the different trails, and it was absolutely plausible to think that as these solo travelers were making their way from what had formerly been outposts to outposts, any number of things could have happened to them, because there just wasn't the security that you would have expected to see, of more fully developed infrastructure. And so, yes, it's a weird family that these search party comes across, but weird is just weird. And they, any number of kinds of trouble could have befallen anybody traveling through that region at that time.
Right. Yeah, there was. So that's partly why they didn't really get aroused when these other people disappeared, because, like you say, there could have been a lot of things that happened to them. But anyway, after about a month or so, he went back. This was in early March of 1873. He went back to Independence and kind of dropped his investigation. But then a month later, in early April, a neighbor of the Benders was passing by their place and noticed that it looked deserted. There was even I think he on closer inspection, he walked up into the property, and on close inspection, he saw that a cow had just basically starved to death. Hadn't been fed for, and so then they came back, and that's when suspicion really started falling on the Benders that they were the ones that had been killing these people. Because they had disappeared real quickly after the doctor had stopped there. And so anyway, they went back to the Bender place and started investigating, and they had these sharp spears, I guess you saw. They found a place out behind the house where the soil looked like it had been freshly disturbed, hadn't been there too long. So they took these spears and started stabbing, and they stabbed down below where one of the spears, when they went in, it went well below where the plow would have gone. It had been plowed, but
the soil was so loose. In other words,
the ground was so loose that the spear went way on down below where it would have been plowed, and so that made them think, there's something else down there below the plow level. So they started digging, and sure enough, they found his body, found the doctor's body. Dr. York. But they found Dr. York's body. And then the next day they came back and did more investigations and found several other bodies, including some of these people who had previously disappeared that they had not known where. Like one of them was a man and his little girl who had left to go to Iowa to visit relatives and had never made it, found his wagon along the way, but they never found them until now. They found him and his little girl and several other people. And so then, of course, when they found all the bodies, they also went back to the house and started looking at the house. And it was basically just one big room, but it was divided by partition, kind of a curtain that was halfway, divided it into two rooms. And there was also a shaft, like you talked about a while ago, a drop place in the floor. And they theorized that how they killed these people was they would stop in at the wayside inn to get a drink or whatever, and they would somehow or another get them to sit down on a chair with their back facing the curtain. And somebody from the opposite side of the curtain was hitting them over the head with a hammer to either stun them or kill them. And then while he was stunned, they would finish it off with slit their throat or whatever. Then they had this trap door that they just drop them through into kind of a cellar area, and then wait till after dark to drag their bodies out into the garden or where they buried all of them. That was their theory anyway.
That's something, and it makes you wonder. Just that, first of all, the thought of you sit down for a bowl of stew, and last thing you see is some shadow coming up behind you, and then that's it. I couldn't help but wonder, what about the what kind of street smarts or kind of savvy, do you not have to just maybe stopping in somebody's home for a bowl of stew, back in those days was way more common than it is now if you were a traveler, on the trail.
Yeah.
But if there's a blood spatter on that table, man, they must have scrubbed mighty hard, to get that sucker out. Right? A repeated blood spatter and a kind of suspicious looking ring around the seat of honor at the table. I mean, I don't know. It chills you to think about the repeated, how many times they did this over and over again.
Well, and after this happened, after they started finding these bodies and they concluded that it was the Benders that had been killing these people, all sorts of people started coming forward, talking about these close escapes they'd had, like this. Yeah. One guy said that he went there and they got him seated in the chair, and he turned around and saw somebody with a hammer, and the guy, whoever had the hammer, immediately started hammering a nail, pretending like he was hammering a nail or something,
Sure.
That sort of thing,
Yeah, I don't think you finish your meal at that point. You know what I mean? It's, hey, hold on. I think I hear my horse. She needs something. Let me just step outside real quick. Take off.
But anyway, of course, the the next thing after this was they, of course, started trying to find the Benders, started looking for them, the Benders. But the problem was that the Benders had almost a month head start, because apparently, from the looks of things, they had disappeared just almost immediately after Dr. York had visited, because people were starting to get suspicious. And so that was their clue to leave. So they had a whole month to make their getaway before anyone really even started after them. They traced them to Thayer, Kansas, where they had abandoned their wagon that they, I think, is in April the 6th. So it was just a matter of 3 or 4 days from the time that Dr. York had visited, but until they had abandoned their wagon in Thayer. So they probably left immediately almost, and caught a train to Humboldt, and then from there they don't really know where they went. So that's one of the big mysteries of the whole thing is they were never found, and they had a lot of false Bender sightings. They even found a couple of women in Michigan back in the 1880s, to 15 years later, and brought them back to Kansas to stand trial, but they were acquitted. They claimed that it was Kate and her mother, but it wasn't. They proved that they weren't the Benders. So they never really did know what happened to the Benders. Some people thought they had made it back to Germany. They were originally from Germany. They were a German family. That kind of takes me back to what I started to say a while ago. We need to kind of flash back. The Benders were a German family. It consisted of a man, his wife, a son who was about mid-20s, and then Kate, who was just a teenager, 16, 17 years old. All of them, except Kate, had been born in Germany. They left Germany and went to France, where Kate was born. Then they came to the United States. Don't know for sure exactly when, but they were listed in the Decatur County, Illinois census in 1870, and that's where I first was able to kind of prove that some of these wild stories about Kate were not true. Because like I said, most of the stories said that she was the leading spirit of the family, and that she was 21, 22, maybe 23 years old, and that she was the one that was kind of behind all this. Well, she was only 16, 17 years old, because in the 1870 census, she was only 13 years old.
Right.
And she had been born in France. The census showed that she had been born in France. Now, just in recent months, just 2 or 3 months ago, a man published a new book about the Benders, and he went into a lot more genealogical research than I did. He traced them on not only back to Illinois as I did, but he traced them clear on back to France and to Germany, and found all the shipping records or the passenger list where they first came to America and so on. And so he has done a lot of genealogical research on them, but I don't know that he really lent any much more light on the murders themselves. What happened to.
There's an interesting element here which you write about, which I thought it just bears mentioning because of their ancestry. The older generation, the parents had accents and didn't speak as much English, but you write that Kate actually spoke she spoke perfect English, but more importantly, she spoke it almost without an accent. So she would have been able, for any of these Americans passing through, she would have been able to make them feel comfortable in a way that, the others might not have.
That's why I say that's probably why people said she was the leading spirit of the family, because she was the one that did most of the communicating with outsiders. She could talk, she could speak fluent English. I think she also spoke some French and some German. She wasn't born in Germany, but she grew up in a German family, so she learned German. She learned a little French because that's where she was born and lived there probably till she was 3 or 4 years old, and then came to America in early enough age to become fluent in English,
And it's funny, you say to speak with outsiders. I think we could just as easily substitute the word victims for outsiders.
Well, outsiders from her family. Well,
of course.
The family
raise the question. Yeah, it raises the question of motive here. And I mean, you suggest that with a couple of these cases, this is pure highway robbery with a little murder thrown in, for good measure, get rid of the evidence, so to speak. Were there any other instances based on what we know about the victims in which there could have been more than just robbery as a motive?
Not that I know of. I mean, as far as I know, they were all strangers to the Benders. The Benders just, like I know the man and his little girl, for instance, the little girl apparently was not, slashed with a knife or hit with a hammer. Apparently they just kind of might have even buried her alive. They don't know exactly how, suffocated her anyway, somehow or another,
Mm-hmm.
And then killed, rather than slashing her throat or hitting on her head. But, apparently he had quite a bit of money with him because they were leaving to go to Iowa, making a long trip. So most of the victims did have some money with them. But, of course, they wouldn't know ahead of time how much money they had probably before they killed them. They just killed them hoping they did have money probably. That's my theory. I think most of them, the motive was robbery.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say there's a special place in hell for folks who go around killing kids. You know what I mean? Right. Wherever the Benders ended up, we can assume they had another destination waiting for them at the end of that particular journey. Now, you're right that with the disappearance is what makes this case so compelling, because really all the leads the trail goes cold, right? Yeah. I mean, just ice cold.
Yeah.
And that's a little unusual because we would have known, train schedules in those days, there's a number of things we could have done, I guess, to chase it up. But is there any possible lead out there that you have encountered that holds any water?
I don't think so. They had all kinds of, like I say, false sightings, and people, supposedly sighted them in Texas and first one place and another. And then a few years after the Benders disappeared, the men started coming forward, some of them on their deathbeds, saying that they had been among the posse that had overtaken the Benders and killed them just south of the Oklahoma line, south of the Kansas-Oklahoma line, and buried them near the Grand River. And for a while, I even kind of fell for that because, why did so many people come forward saying that that's what happened if it didn't really happen, But there's a couple of flaws in that story. One thing, the big one, is that, like I said before, the Benders had a 30-day head start. There's no way that they would have hung around within 20 or 30 miles of where they killed all these people, waiting to be overtaken and killed. That just doesn't make sense that they would have done that. And the other thing, because they would have
had to reprovision, they would have had to get food and be near cities to outfit their horses and all that kind of stuff. I mean, any number of things, right? Yeah,
there's this. Yeah, and the other thing is that all the people who were in the position to know about the case said that was, they said those were all just lies, just canards. Anybody coming forward saying that the Benders had been overtaken and killed. For instance, Dr. York was one of the ones that discounted that idea, and the governor of Kansas, who had put out the proclamation and the one, offered the award and the wanted poster, he said that wasn't true. So I don't know why anyone would want to. Another thing, another problem with that theory is if that really did happen, why did they wait till they were on their deathbed to come forward? Because they would not have been thrown in jail, and they would have been greeted as heroes, probably.
Right. So, last question, I guess I have for you, because this is in the wind. These are they're gone. There's no tracing them at this point. It is just such a captivating story. Last question I have for you is, whatever became of the actual old homestead there? Now, you had this kind of funny thing where, once the bodies are discovered, you have a crowd of 1,000 people swarming the area. And I think, good Lord, talk about ruining a crime scene. You got 1,000 people tromping all over the place. But that being said, what's the status of the homestead today? You mentioned an archaeological dig?
Yes. Of course, the old cabin itself is no longer there, but they do know where it was. And, For the last 2 summers, last summer and this summer, they've had an archaeological team from the University of Kansas, or Kansas University, down here doing. I have not been out to see it, but they've been doing a archaeological dig, trying to come up with artifacts or any kind of clues that maybe turn up more victims than they previously knew about, and trying to identify all the victims and that sort of thing, and maybe shed light on somehow on the crimes themselves. But so it is still a current event kind of in this area. People are still,
it's a question mark, not a period at the end of that sentence, and
right.
It will remain so for many years to come. But it is a fascinating story, Larry, and as grisly as it is, we appreciate your shining some light on it, and just always sit with your back to the wall, folks. As a rule,
follow the lead of Wild Bill Hickok. He didn't do it that one time.
I tell you. Well, look, it has been such a pleasure having you here on Crime Capsule these last couple of weeks with us and taking us through some of the true. Your book is Truth in Advertising, Murder and Mayhem. We got it both in Southeast Kansas.
Southeast Kansas, yeah.
Well, we sure do appreciate it, and keep us posted, and we'll love to have you back on.
Okie doke.
Thanks for listening. Our guest has been Larry Wood, author of Murder and Mayhem in Southeast Kansas, published by the History Press. To order a copy of the book, visit your local independent bookstore or visit arcadiapublishing.com. That's it for our series of Crimes of Passion for the hot summer months. Stay tuned next week as we wrap up our 3rd overall season of Crime Capsule with something truly special. No spoilers. See you then. Thanks as always to our producer, Bill Huffman, our production director, Bridget Coyne, audio engineer, Ian Douglas, and our executive producers, Michael DeLoya and Gerardo Orlando. I'm your host, Benjamin Morris. Crime Capsule is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and a signature title of the Killer Podcasts Network. You can find Crime Capsule wherever you listen to podcasts. Discover more great true crime and paranormal programming at killerpodcasts.com.
Is the pressure of your wedding day being perfect from sunrise to sunset weighing on your mind? Well, it shouldn't. Planning a wedding is stressful, but we are here to help. On the Bride Chiller podcast, we celebrate love and help you plan your wedding day without the bullshit. We're all about keeping it real and having fun every step of the way. So whether you're just starting to plan or counting down the days, we are here to help you stay cool, calm, chill, and collected. We have expert tips and amazing guests. Let's get this party started and embrace your inner Bride Chiller. Listen to Bride Chiller wherever you get your podcasts or visit us at thebridechiller.com.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.